I had an opportunity to chat with a number of you during the break. I know it's only 45 minutes, but you know, as the breaks go along, I'm accustomed to speaking all day. This is not novel to me, and you're not disrupting me in any way. And of course, I'm looking forward to hearing from those of you who would like to get sample copies of the proposal, or if you have difficulty accessing the link where we've put the slides and some of the other material, reach out to our office as well, and we will have them to you. We may just include the link also in our newsletter going out this week, so you can know where to download it from the county's website. If you have not signed up for her newsletter, I recommend that you do. Our staff outside can help you get signed up for that. We share a lot of what happens in District 5 and throughout the county each week. The newsletter goes out on Friday. We'd love to have you on our mailing list to keep you abreast of what we're doing, all right? So we definitely would appreciate that. All right. Now we're going to move on to a couple other important elements. We talked about the statement of need, which essentially is the pivotal point of every good proposal. Everything builds from there. And as I indicated earlier, one of the nature of a proposal is that it has built-in redundancy. The same thing gets stated in multiple different ways at different parts of it, okay? So for example, your statement, your goals, objectives, outcomes, impacts get stated explicitly in one section, but then they show up in your logic model, which we'll discuss a little bit later on. All right. Okay, thank you. All right, so there is that. And, it's okay to have that redundancy because it's multiple ways in which your proposal gets viewed. And there are people who may read certain sections of it, and that's all they read. All right, so it's important that you make sure all the sections are properly completed. So in addition to the logic model and the budget, there's also the evaluation section. Now, for years, I referred to this as the evaluation protocol, and there's a reason why I don't just call the section evaluation. People sometimes misunderstand. I've even had cases where people, as a part of this section, submitted an actual evaluation, although I'm baffled as to how you evaluate something that doesn't yet exist. Right? All it is, the evaluation protocol, is just a plan as to demonstrate to the grantor how you will evaluate whether or not the program has been successful. So we gauge this a lot too. If you can't test to see if your program is working, how do you expect us to? So this is telling us, if you give me this money, this is how we will demonstrate to you that the program is actually working. For the Keller Canyon Mitigation Fund, we do require 2 evaluations during the funding cycle. We have a mid-cycle one that is called a formative evaluation. I'll explain what that means in a bit. And then at the end of the grant program is a summative evaluation. And those are just 2 evaluation types that we'll cover in this area. Keep this in mind, though. A formative evaluation is just an evaluation that is done at any point while the program is operating. So you can do multiple formative evaluations, but a summative evaluation, as the name suggests, is one. It's done at the end of the funding cycle, right? So there's some grantors that may require you to do a quarterly report. That's the same thing, formative evaluation. So you may do 3 of those, and then at the end, you do 1 summative evaluation. It varies. You may choose, even though we require 2, to do more for your own internal benefits, and that's a good thing always to do. The point being, you really do have to evaluate. Now, there are very sophisticated evaluations that you can do, and then there are the very basic types of evaluations that we can do. So we're not looking here at very sophisticated stuff for sure. We're just looking at the basics in terms of what is required. So let's talk then about why we evaluate, right? Now, you can do an evaluation if you want to explore the feasibility of a program, like a pilot study. That's one reason why you may do one. That's not related and required of a grant. You may do an evaluation to determine if the expenditure plan that you have for the grant program is workable. You may do an evaluation for the purpose of giving scientific legitimacy to what you're doing, to get external validation, and of course you do summative evaluations at the end of each program. And then there are certain conditions that need to exist to make the evaluations worthwhile. One, this is important, you need to have those, remember we talked about this earlier, the goals, outcomes, all of them clearly articulated, because those will provide the basis for your evaluation. So the most common type of evaluation that is done in the grant-making world today are outcomes-based evaluation. But there are goals-based evaluations, there are other types of evaluations, but the most common ones are the outcomes-based evaluations. If your outcomes were not clearly articulated, you run into a problem now. Your evaluation won't come together well. That's what I meant when I said everything ties to the next section, right? So just do keep that in mind. It's good, ideally, if you're doing an evaluation, to have a history of doing the program for a little while. Now, there is a type of evaluation that you can do, which is a pre-implementation validation. I don't think that's on your slides, that you can take place before the program actually begins. Some people can consider that a sort of a pre-test, with the plans to do a post-test, where they ask the same set of questions of the participants in the program at the very onset, gauge their understanding and knowledge at that point, implement the program, revisit the same questions, and see if there's a difference in the answers. Pre-test, post-test, pretty standard, right? But our grant programs that I've been talking about for the county do not require that. We don't require a pretest. A pretest sets the baseline for what you are going to deliver, right? Now, when we have faculty or graduate students doing research, and it's statistical in nature, and they plan to implement a treatment, then we usually say it makes sense, always have a pretest, do the application of your cure, your program, and then do a post-test to see how it works. Here's an example. Let's say you're operating a program at Boys and Girls Club, right? You're doing a program at Boys and Girls Club, and you want to do a tutorial program for girls in terms of girls being exposed to coding, right? That's an area I support very strongly, by the way. There's been a number of studies that indicate disproportionality in terms of those technical fields in which boys are urged to advance and girls are not. Right? And that's something I think that needs to be addressed. So let's say you were saying, we want to correct that issue by having a program to teach girls how to code. And you may want to measure the attitudes of girls towards that type of work by doing a pre-test when they come in. And then you take them through the coding program and measure it to see if their attitudes have changed. Because if they don't buy into it, it's not going to work. Right? So that's just an example of what we're talking about here. All right, so what do we need then for program evaluation? Well, number one, you need to have a way to collect information. Sometimes we grant money to people, and people get so excited about having the money and eager to do the program, and that's fine, that they forget to collect data on the program. When you get money, and even by the way, federal agencies that give you money want data, just so you know. You just can't take $50,000 and spend it and say, oh, we're all happy now. No, they want to see data. What did you do with it? What did you accomplish? What changed? What impacts were there? So you do have to have really a systematic way of collecting the data, and more than that, you need to have a way of focusing again on those program outcomes and so forth. So that's going to be really very, very important. That is where the logic model also comes in. And I want to talk about that. What exactly is a logic model? For the Keller Canyon Mitigation Fund, as I mentioned earlier, anything $5,000 or greater, you have to do a logic model. The vast majority of grantor agencies, foundations, require a logic model. And because the logic model is a visual representation of the entire program, it shows on a single sheet of paper, and I'll show you a simple logic model, and I'll show you a very complex logic model. They're very varied in terms of what they can look like, and it's scary if you see the complex one first. All right, it's very scary. But what it does is visually, I can look at a logic model and tell what you're inputting, what the activities are you're engaged in, what the personnel are for the program, what the outcomes are, all of that on a single sheet of paper. You'll see momentarily what that looks like. So it is a way of illustrating what you do, why you do it, and what you hope to achieve and measure with the program, right? So when you're beginning to develop this logic model and you're beginning to develop your evaluation, the two go hand in hand, because you're looking at program planning, you're looking at how the program is implemented, and the performance evaluation ultimately. So This is your basic logic model outline. A logic model has really 5 elements, right? Just these 5 elements. The first element would be inputs that your organization actually are putting to this program should you get the grant money. I'll show you momentarily what some of those inputs may look like, but I'll quickly mention a couple in passing. If you are providing personnel, right, for the program, then that is one of your inputs. Here's another input. If you have recruited volunteers to help with the program, that's one of your inputs for the logic model. If you are providing the building in which classes are being held, right? Let's say you're doing diabetes education. You have a program where you're targeting, let's say you're targeting the Latino population for high prevalence of hypertension and diabetes, right? And you want to do education around how to mitigate that. And part of that is that you are going to use a small room in your office to hold these sort of informational meetings. The provision of the room is an input, right? So that gives you a sort of a general idea what that might look like. And then the next part of a logic model would be activities and strategies that you will employ in terms of what you will do with the program. So inputs are the tangible things that you provide, and the activities are what they do. The class, for example, in that room would be an activity, right? Let's say, for example, you decide to have a cooking class on healthier eating, right? Let's say, for example, you do decide that you want to have the ability for individuals to have their blood pressure checked to identify people who are perhaps at risk for hypertension, right? And let's say you want to do that, or it's diabetes related and you want to talk about, blood sugar testing and so forth. Those activities that you actually are providing, that will fall in that second category. Then you will have outputs, right? Now you're beginning to talk about what comes out of that effort, and then the outcomes which you already have developed, and the goals and impacts. Let me give you another one. I'll go through each of them now individually, so you don't have to remember everything I just said. I wrote a summary for each one, all right, in the slides. Number 1, inputs, materials or resources that your agency commits to providing to reach the results. Any activity that your agency provides, personnel, volunteers, equipment, all of those are considered inputs. All right? Very important. Your activities are the strategies, services, the interventions that you put into this. We talked about that. The outputs are how they will tangibly measure what you've actually put in. And of course, the outcomes, we talked about that earlier, short and long-term effects. And the impact will be the change in the organization or the community as a result of your activities. So that's what that is. So then, I've put a little bit more this time in each of those boxes. That when we talk about inputs, we're really looking at materials and our resources, activities and strategies. I sort of summarize what each is. And now I want to give you, this is an actual logic model, a very simple one that was provided to the county years ago by an organization in West Contra Costa County that were proposing to do a transitional housing program. This is an actual logic model. And you can see the inputs. Now, this is a basic one. This is not a very complex one and not a very sophisticated one. But notice their inputs: staffing, service partners, volunteers, facilities, funding, and then activities, housing, counseling, job placement. What this does is give you an idea what should be in it, but not necessarily at the level of detail that we want it to be in, right? So let me just go over here, and this is a complex one. This one, as you can see, was a real organization, Appian House. Right? And they provided this one to the county as well. Now, if you look at inputs, and I get it that this is pretty small. Let me see if I can zoom in. Maybe not. Right? But if you notice on the inputs, rather than just, it's really small, rather than just saying staffing, it says here, let me just do a circle right here. It says 5.42 FTE staffing. So it gets into the details of how many staff. Keep in mind that 5.42 FTE does not necessarily mean there's no 0.42 person. That should tell you right there. That could be any number of individuals. It's full-time equivalent we're looking at. It could be 8 people, for all you know, that comprise 5.42 full-time equivalents. That becomes important for the budget. That's the next step, right? So here we have 5.42 FTE as part of your input. And notice the facility here is a 6-bedroom single-family home. That's what comes right here next. Right here. Right? 6-bedroom facility home. That's an input. That's what the organization has provided. Then they list a bunch of other things. They list additional funding that they're receiving on the bottom here. This. So inputs include other sources of funding that you might have, that you're bringing to the table, all the inputs. So think of it this way. What is my organization bringing to the table in asking for this money? And I'm going to list all of it right here. Everything, including if somebody else gives it to you. If somebody is volunteering their time to you, put it as an input. You got it, so you should list it. So all the things that you are getting, that you're contributing to this program, whether directly or through a secondary party, included in here. That makes for a very rich and sophisticated logic model. Now here's the interesting thing. I can look at this logic model and tell basically almost everything I need to know about this program. This single sheet can tell me almost everything I need to know. Notice, by the way, that I know it's very small. Right about here, they have Contra Costa Health Services, mental health services. What they've done is partnered with the county health services to provide these services. But they initiated it with the county, so they list it as well as an input. List your partnerships in the input as well. So when you look at Appian Houses, this particular funding model here, they got the money, by the way, and it's been years ago. It's almost 10 years old. That's why I'm using it now, more than 10. When you look at their inputs, it's a very rich type of contribution they're bringing. When I look at this, I'm thinking, oh, man, they're doing a heck of a lot. So, yeah, we'd like to get on board with that. It looks really great. Now we come over to activities, right? The second column. And they're telling you what they're going to do. Now, let me tell you what they did that is not required, but was a genius move to make. You see those arrows they have right here? See these arrows? And over here? What they did is that they took their inputs and tied them with arrows to specific activities that they're doing. Then they took their activities and tied them to specific outputs. They didn't have to do that, but that's their way of saying, look, we really know what we're doing here. If we do this, we get that, and if we get that, then we get that, and then we get that. When we look at this, I'm thinking, oh yeah, I can see this. I don't even need to read the proposal. I can see the whole thing in one fell swoop right here, right? And that's why I didn't show you this first, because like I said, this one is a bit daunting to look at. So they talk about the activities, case management, for example, right? And they talk about what that would mean, case management, housing search assistance, vocational services, education referrals. Then you come over here to outputs, and they have, this is important, what they've done is listed them, now they begin to get numeric, 144 unduplicated youth contacted through outreach. They begin to pull this from the outcomes section of the proposal. They didn't have to recreate it here, so it's already done. So they're putting it in here, filling this out. Then they did something unusual. They chose to combine outcomes and impacts so that they have 4 categories instead of 5. And that's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. They combined them and they made really a good summary and a good case. And this was their logic model, right? Now, does yours have to be this detailed for every proposal? Not at all. But at least the categories must be present, and as much information as you have must be present, right? Let me just mention something else in passing, by the way. Writing a proposal, contrary to what most people who don't know seem to think, is never a one-person effort. Particularly in public organizations, county departments, city departments, department heads always walk up to you and say, hey, we need money for this, write a grant. not realizing the amount of resources that actually need to go into pulling this all together. All this data has to come from somewhere. You don't necessarily have all of it. You'll need colleagues to weigh in, to evaluate, and so forth, right? That is why doing a feasibility study first when they propose this to you and say, look, we've looked at this, and by the way, I've done that to the city of Pittsburgh when I was an employee eons ago. I remember they came to me and said, you should write a proposal for this. This was about 20 plus years ago. And I looked at it and evaluated it back then, and I said, not practical. It won't fly. They had the good sense to listen to me, by the way, and we never did apply, right? Just because you really are eager to get money, and because somebody releases an RFP, doesn't mean that it's ideal for your organization. You need to think about it carefully and see what resources you have to be able to pull it off, right? So I think that's going to be really important. Let me stop there. Logic model. Any questions on what I've shown you so far? The logic model. In the back, microphone. Did we lose our personnel? Okay, there we are. Oh, the microphones were in lunch break, weren't they? In the back?
She got her answer.
Yes, please, go right ahead.
No, she said she got her answer.
Okay, you got your answer. By just looking at my face, that's it? Oh man, I'm getting good. Wow, I didn't even say anything. She just looked at me and go, I have my answer. Thank you, I know. All right, any other questions on the logic model? Right here in the front, two over here.
Not a question. Can you speak about that top line and why is it having the goals up there?
Oh, actually good. It isn't required, but they put their goals up there because the logic model is a reflection of the entire program, and it's actually in part built on the goals. That's why they're up there. And it helps to keep you focused as you are writing and preparing your logic model if those goals are right on top for you to look at. Thank you for catching that, by the way. Right? Yes?
Good idea to add the numbers for your outputs, as in the first did not show numbers, but now this one does.
Yes.
You recommend?
You should. I recommend that you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as a matter of to enhance their writing skills for proposals, I require students in this particular, in HCA 642 is the course number that our healthcare students are required to take. I usually require them to number everything, and I usually require them to get into the practice of developing multiple goals and outcomes by requiring them to do 2 goals, and for each goal, 2 objectives, and for each goal objectives, 2 outcomes, and a program impact. So that when they leave and they write their proposals, all their proposals they submit for grading have 2 goals, multiple objectives, multiple outcomes, so that they develop the skill of doing them. Right? And so it's a matter of good practice, right? As a matter of good practice, I think you should have, at least a couple outcomes, and they should be identified numerically, so that it's easy to spot. Good question. Any other? Any other questions on the logic model? If not, all right, we will then move along. So a quick summary on the logic models, right? And it tells you what they should do. Basically, again, who, what, and how of the organization and the program. All of what you've done so far comes and becomes a part of influencing the content of your logic model. So the logic model provides a framework for evaluating your program, but then there is a formal evaluation that we need to talk about. And so I'm going to switch to that just right now and talk a bit about evaluating your program. How many of you have done either an internal or external evaluation of the program you currently work for, manage, supervise? I see one hand, 2, 3, 4. Can somebody bring a microphone? And you can tell me a bit about how you proceeded with your evaluation. What did it take? What did you base it on? Who wants to dive in? In the back? All the way in the back. Tell us what you did in terms of a starting point for that evaluation. What guided you in it?
So we spent about a year and a half creating a donut economic snapshot of the state of California. Donut economics, I encourage you guys to just type it into YouTube or whatever if you're curious about that. And that meant we had to look at all the social indicators and environmental indicators for the state of California, which meant we had to reach out. We started with what questions are we going to ask for the data we wanted to find. So what are the questions
right?
we're going to ask? And then how do we ask for each set of data points? How do we ask a few different questions coming at a few different angles? So we don't just like actually end up getting biased, asking one question and not recognizing the other side of that angle. And then from that, we also sourced not just government organizations and academic organizations, but we also tried to find grassroots organizations, community leaders, indigenous communities throughout the state of California, because they had different metrics, and they even verbalized them differently than like government and academic. So we had to also open up language for ourselves and for each other so that we don't get caught in the trap of language.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else did an evaluation? What did you do? What did you base it on? All of a sudden, the hands disappeared. My goodness, right here.
So our program was in regards to emotional wellness.
Okay.
So after we took our participants and kind of assigned them numbers so that way we could quantify their data, we did assessments at the beginning and then also at the end of the program, and then compared that data. So based on the questions about their thoughts about their mental status at before and after, and we were able to show the increase or decrease in their feelings afterwards.
Okay, good, thank you. So it was more of a pre-test, post-test then, initially, got you, okay. So, yes, one more, I see you, please.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Maria Rosa Ferreira. I'm coming from the Contra Costa Public Health Department, specifically with the HIV STI. So recently we have discovered that a lot of cases that we are receiving are positives between the ages of 18 and 24. So our goal was to bring testing to community colleges, and sorry, I get nervous talking. And our goal was to bring testing to the community college levels because we did a pilot run at LMC, and we noticed that a lot of students did not know how HIV was contracted.
Wow.
The education around that is very low, and a lot of things have gone politically wrong, and specifically with HIV, the LGBTQ community. So HIV is still stigmatized, unfortunately. And my coworker and I, we were able to do a grant proposal or a proposal with one of our managers to be able to incorporate our testing at all 5 sites across Contra Costa County. And we are now at LMC, DVC, CCC, and people are still lacking that basic education. So now we are trying to recruit more people from our staff ourselves to be able to educate, because we're seeing that the lack of the positive cases isn't the testing, it's the education. So now we're trying to run a pilot program on how we could engage younger people to come get tested and educated on HIV.
Yeah, one of the reasons for doing, are you hearing me? Yeah. Okay, one of the reasons for doing evaluations is to conduct a pilot, in fact, to make a determination. And I think that's actually a good program. And I come from a different era when HIV was not as routine as it is now. I come from an era when fear was the dominant factor in even discussing HIV. My nonprofit career began in New York City many eons ago with a contract with the New York State Department of Health back then to form one of the first HIV care networks under Ryan White Title II. Yeah, I have a long history before coming to the public sector, yeah. We created, via the New York Urban League, the HIV care networks, the first HIV care networks in that state. So obviously we're talking the 1990s here, right? Now, people are just sort of taking HIV issues for granted, and I think younger people have less exposure to the nature of it. There may be more familiarity these days with Mpox, right, than there is with HIV, right? And some of the same stigmas have emerged again, by the way, and I feel like I'm watching this all over again, years later. So yeah, absolutely some issues there. Thank you for sharing that. So in terms of doing these evaluations, let's talk about when we can do them. I think the example you just gave as a pilot is a good point to start, of course, when you can do that. So you can do what is called a developmental evaluation. That's what you just are looking at right now with your pilot. You can do a pre-implementation evaluation. I mentioned this briefly in passing. You can do a formative evaluation. As a matter of fact, for all grant programs that you're funded, you will be required to do a formative evaluation. These names, by the way, are not descriptive of the nature of the evaluation so much as to when the evaluation is done. To be clear on that. A summative evaluation, which you will always be required to do. Now, these next two are in fact descriptive in terms of what they accomplish rather than when they're done, and they are knowledge-generating evaluations meant for just gathering information, and intervention-oriented evaluation when you're trying to develop a strategic intervention. Let's say, for example, I'll give you an example of a strategic intervention we did many years ago. When I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, came to the Bay Area in the mid-1990s, and ultimately went to work in the mid-1990s for Volunteers of America. And at the time, of course, HIV was still really quite rampant here in the Bay Area, and there was an unusual occurrence that most people probably these days know nothing about. There was a case or a series of cases where they noted that individuals who were being released from prison would often promptly go to a bank or someplace high risk and feign robbing them. Yeah, and they quickly discovered there was a point of commonality among these people. They all were HIV positive. They were doing it so they could be reincarcerated to continue to get HIV care. Thus, the implementation, right, of a program that we did via Volunteers of America in partnership with the Department of Corrections. It wasn't called Corrections and Rehabilitation back then, right? Called the Transitional Case Management Program. It paired a registered nurse with a licensed clinical social worker to become the case management team for these individuals who are going to be released from prison but are HIV positive, to say to them, we can get you the services you need, you don't have to try to get back in. That was the history of that program, and yes, I wrote the proposal for it. All right? So there's a long history there, and so this was what we would call an intervention-oriented evaluation. We actually went into prison. By the way, the Department of Corrections was so happy, they even provided state cars to Volunteers of America for our staff to drive around, to go anywhere and meet the clients we wanted to. Right? Because we needed something. So we came up with this thing, and we started intervening by talking with people and interviewing individuals who were coming out. And it was an interesting experience. So yes, there is that kind of evaluation. Not a lot of it is being done these days, but it is. So for our purposes, for most of what you will be required to do are these two types. A formative evaluation. A formative evaluation is simply an evaluation done anytime while the program is operating. Right? Anytime while the program is operating, you can do a formative evaluation. There is no limit on the number of evaluations that you can do that are formative. You can do one a month if you want to. It's crazy, but you can. Right? You can do one a quarter. Unless the grantor says to you, you must provide me with a quarterly one, then you have to do one every quarter. All right? So a formative evaluation is simply a way of evaluating if the program has been successful or is being successful to date. Whereas the summative evaluation is the one that looks back and says, now that the grant cycle is over, how was this program? Did it work? Did it go as planned? That's a summative evaluation. So here's the trick. Most recipients of grants don't want to do summative evaluations. You want to guess why? Yeah.
Not reaching program goals?
Well, they're not meeting the program goals. But a good try. They don't want the funding to end. And they're thinking that if they say to the grantor, oh, this worked wonderfully well, they say, good, job done, bye. So what happens is that we've discovered a trend when we look at the summative evaluations, which are technically the post-program cycle evaluations. They look awfully like formative evaluations and show that there's still a lot to be done. Yeah. But those people don't understand the nature of the funding world very well. That's why they're taking that tact, right? The summative evaluation is less about whether or not the program is no longer needed, right? As a matter of fact, in the summative evaluation, there is a question that has to be answered, and it is this. Has the program reached a natural end of life? That's one of the questions. And if it hasn't, you simply say, no, it has not, because although we've effectively met all the stated objectives, we have a new growing client base that still requires services into the next year. Simple, right? But again, people often don't know what questions should be properly addressed in the summative evaluation, and that is what what happens. Let me show you the language. And I've written on the slides, by the way, the questions that each type of evaluation is supposed to ask when you do them. All right? 1, are the milestones being met? The milestones being the outcomes and so on that you projected. Are they being met? Because these are outcomes-based. Right? Number 2, are the objectives that you stated them truly measurable? Now you have to go back and ask, well, if the milestones are or are not being met, is what we presented when we wrote the proposal truly measurable now that we're actually doing it? It's different planning to do something than sometimes it is actually doing it. When you get there, sometimes you realize, we're not asking the right questions. We need to change how this is done. And this is an opportunity during the formative evaluation to tell the grantor what needs to be modified. Don't set yourself up to failure by thinking, once we write this, this is the way it has to be forever. Are changes necessary? Are program refinements possible? And is the program on track to meet its goals? Now, look at the summative evaluation questions. Did the program meet the outcomes? Did the outcomes support the objectives? And that question, did the program reach a natural end of life? In other words, there are no more clients, you fix everything, nothing is broken anymore. And for most of the services that we do as community-based organizations, the answer is no. Because if you're feeding hungry people, I got news for you. When you finish feeding this hungry batch, there's another hungry batch waiting. They're always there. Right? The poor we always have with us, right? So hunger persists, right? We have not eliminated HIV. We found ways to keep it controlled with cocktails and so on, but it's still there. We've not eliminated Mpox, right? And any number of other types of diseases. So basically you have to say, no, the program has not reached its natural end of life because the issues that it addressed still persist. It's really that simple. Accordingly, we plan to apply during the next cycle for a renewal of this grant program to continue to expand those services. Really quite simple. All right, that's important. But then you're going to say, what are we going to do differently next time? This is your chance to tell them that even though you're going to be asking for money again, there are a couple of things you may propose to do differently. The Board of Supervisors were conducting an interview for a certain office in the county that I shall leave unnamed a couple months ago. And one of the supervisors asked an internal employee, what would you do differently from your predecessor were you given this position? And the person said, nothing. Absolutely nothing. And this was in reference to a system that all of us who work in the county know is broken. And so we all kind of look like, did we just drop into the twilight zone here or something? Nothing? Let me tell you something. Doesn't matter how sophisticated your program is in terms of its delivery, there's always room for improvement. And if you've learned nothing from your previous cycle, you don't deserve to get the money again. There has to be improvements, ways you can do things better. There may be minor changes that need to be made, but you need to look closely at your program and ask, what can we do differently? We've been doing the Keller Canyon Mitigation Grant Program before I got to the county. I've been in this office for 19 years. And before that, it had been going on for about 5 years. But we're constantly changing. We're going back with changes to it within the next month. We're constantly tweaking what is asked and how we measure things and how we do things. Because the nature of humanity is that it's a constant growth that takes place and the environment changes. And if the environment changes, then our service delivery changes and how we measure things must change accordingly. I tell my students all the time, I have students who ask me, can you provide us a sample of what students have done for this particular class? I said, I would like to, except that I change the classes every couple of years. Same class, different content. Do you know why? Because the students are not paying the university to come and hear me teach stuff I was teaching 20 years ago. It needs to be modern, it needs to be relevant, and anything short of that is laziness on my part. Right? And I'm not in the business of being lazy. So I'm constantly looking for ways to evaluate and change and grow and learn for myself. And so when you're delivering a program and it comes to doing these evaluations, make sure the program evaluation that you're doing conveys to the grantor that you have grown. We have someone who sits in our Keller Canyon committee, Daniel Davis. If you've received Keller money, he works for the Department of Conservation and Development. He's the staff person to our committee. He does the behind-the-scenes grunge work. Somebody has to, right? And he often asks people when they come multiple years for Keller money in our interviews, he asks them, so you've been doing this now for 10 years, what would you do differently? Right? What would you do differently? What has changed? What is going to be better for your clients, for your constituents? And I think that's going to be the important part. Now, we talked earlier now about the types of evaluation. The formative and summative is when the evaluation is done. The question is and we give you questions that should be in the evaluations, but the question is, are there different types that you can do? Yes, there are. Generally speaking, you can do evaluations that are based on numbers, statistics, percentages. And then you can do evaluations that are more reflective, more humanistic, more interpretive, and those are qualitative evaluations, where you ask questions. Is one more legitimate than the other? Absolutely not, right? There are lived experiences that can't be conveyed in a survey with numbers and dots, right? I often say to people, it really doesn't matter how much I talk about it or read about it. I do not know and will never understand what it means to be a woman because I haven't had the lived experience, right? And it doesn't matter how well-intentioned you are, and I say this with the utmost respect. It doesn't matter how well-intentioned you are and how kind and compassionate you are. If you have not lived in the experience of being a Latina, you don't know what it means to be that. And so that person's voice has more weight and more significance than yours because they've lived it, right? So qualitative types of evaluations where we have what we call rich, thick descriptions of what the clients are saying this has meant to them are important. We even ask for photos if it's not going to compromise confidentiality, HIPAA regulations, or anything like that. But if you have events, we say, send us photos so that we can look and see what is it that you're doing because we can't be there. So don't think for a moment that somehow statistical inquiry is weighted better and more scientific. You know, funny enough, by the way, as an aside, I've been teaching research methods for a lot of years, and I teach both quant and qual, statistics and qualitative. And last year, for the first time, after I did a major overhaul of the research methods course, the majority of my graduate students opted to do a statistical research proposal. For many years, the majority of them always opted to do qualitative because they were scared to hell and back of statistics, right? And you want to know how they came about to do that? Simple. I told them, I said, listen, I know that the technology has changed. To use statistical software like SPSS, Statistical Package for the Social Sciences, is expensive and complicated. Let's embrace what technology is available. And we punched the same statistical requests into ChatGPT, and voila, it produced the exact same information that SPSS was producing. And I told the students, if this is at your disposal, it's no different than putting it in Statistical Package for the Social Sciences. And all of a sudden, it was within their reach. I believe in embracing technology for learning. I really do. And that changed the dynamic. Now, I say that to say this. That does not mean that we ever want to give more credence to numbers than we do to people's experiences, right? That's important. So keep in mind that you can do statistical studies, you can do qualitative studies, or if you want the best of both worlds, do a hybrid. We call that mixed methods, right? So you can look at the goals of an organization and the goals that you set for your program. You can do your evaluation on that. I don't find that useful. Simple reason. Goals are super broad. Increase or decrease something. That's just broad. How do you measure that you're actually increasing or decreasing? So I don't necessarily like goals-based evaluations, but just in case you come across a grantor other than us that requires it, I've put the questions in here for you that a goals-based evaluation often will address. How were the program goals established? That's one, in case you have to do a goals-based evaluation. What is the status of the program in achieving the goals? Are the goals likely to be achieved in the established timeline? And do the organization's personnel have adequate resources to achieve the goals? If you're doing a goals-based evaluation, if the grantor you applied to said, this is what we expect, then this is how it's done. These are the questions that are actually going to be asked. Here are some more details, right, that you can use for that, right? Should we change the timeline? Should we put more focus on achieving the goals? Should the goals be changed for the future? The one that we require, and the one that is the most popular, is the outcomes-based evaluation. Remember we talked earlier about all those things contributing. Now you're coming to your evaluation, you need those outcomes again. The same outcomes in the logic model, the same outcomes in the goals, objectives, outcomes, impacts. Now you need them again because you're using them now to do evaluation. It is the most widely used form of evaluation today from any grant or agency. And what I've done, because this one is the most widely used, and we've got about, what time is our break scheduled for, by the way? Is it 2:15? 2:45? Oh, let's just stroll then. Yeah, we got time. Yeah, so if we're looking at doing an outcomes-based evaluation, because it is the most popular, I did more than just identify what questions you should ask. I've outlined for you here in detail what the steps are in doing the outcomes-based evaluation. This is what will be required of you the vast majority of time. Step number one, identify the major outcomes you want to examine under this program evaluation. What does that mean? Wait a minute. I thought you said we create the outcomes, we put them in the logic model, and now we evaluate based on those outcomes. Not 100%. You don't have to base your evaluation on all the outcomes that you identified for the program. You identify which ones are the most important to the program and do the evaluation on that. So let's say you have 6 outcomes. You can say our evaluation for this period will be based on 2 of the outcomes. Why? Because these are the 2 most challenging to achieve. These are the 2 where we find most of the need is, so we'll focus on these 2. Perfectly acceptable, right? You have to identify which you consider the major outcomes. There's an advantage to this. The grantor is not telling you which outcomes to answer to. You're telling them which ones you will answer to. So you will tell them that if we were given this money and we're going to do our evaluation, we will focus on 2 of these outcomes when it's time to do the evaluation, because now you're just proposing an evaluation plan, right? So for example, you may say, this one closer aligns with our mission. This one closer aligns with the greatest needs we see from a recent needs assessment. You make the decision. It's your choice. Right? Put it this way. It's kind of like when you're writing a research document, there's a section called the methodology, and we usually talk about, in our methods section, what we will talk about and what we will not talk about. And it's considered very scholarly to make a determination as to the parameters of what your study will cover and what it will not cover. Nobody can challenge you, because that's what scholars do. So similarly, when it comes to the outcomes, it's your choice as to which ones you think are most critical, because you are delivering the service. So identify the major outcomes that you want to use and you plan to use in your evaluation. Number 2, choose the ones you want to examine and prioritize them, right? Pick the top 2, 4 at most is what I would say. Number 3, for each outcome, this is important. For each outcome in an evaluation, when you're doing the actual evaluation, you need to specify what observable measures and indicators will suggest that you are observing that outcome. So you will say, when we do this evaluation, we will base it on outcome number 2, which says we will provide services for 60 students by 6 weeks into the program. And if you're going to say we're going to measure it on this outcome, this is what we will look for when we measure this outcome for our first evaluation. So you're planning and telling them what you're going to be looking at, and then they're going to look to see that you actually did just that, right? Number 4, specify a target goal of clients. So what number of clients you commit to achieving specific outcomes. Example, we talked about this, increase self-reliance for 70% of adult African-American women living in inner city Minneapolis. You get the idea, right? Talking about measurables that to the extent that you can. And question number 5, identify what information is needed, by the way, to show these indicators, to show that it's actually working. Number 6, decide how can the information be efficiently gathered. Talk about how you will gather the information to measure if your evaluation program is working, right? You need to say how the information is coming about. So if you are measuring if your program is successfully leading to a decline of diabetes and pre-diabetes in the African-American population, say in the city of Antioch, you need to say, well, the way we will do this is that we will have them bring in a report of their A1C. Those of you who are not diabetic, just ignore that. You may not figure what I'm talking about, right? And those of you who are interested, I'm a teacher, I should explain. The A1C is actually a measure of the average blood sugar in a person over a 3 to 6 month period. It's more reliable than doing a blood stick that checks the level of your blood sugar at the moment. The A1C looks for markers in your blood over that extended period, and it ranges from 6, let's say 5 to 7, with 6 being pre-diabetes, anything 6.1, 6.2, 6.3 being definitely diabetic, all the way to about a 7.0. Anything about 7.0, you need to see your doctor and fast. All right? So, if you're going to do something to measure the reduction of incidence of diabetes for a particular community in a particular place, you need to say we will do this by requiring that they bring in their A1C reports. And the idea is that we hope that when they start off, let's suppose they have an A1C of 7.0, our goal is to get it down to, say, a 6.8, which is manageable diabetes, by the way, type 2, right? That indicates diabetes, yeah, it's actually considered managed at 6.8. 7.0 is a threshold they don't want you to go over, because once you get over 7.0, you have ancillary effects such as blurred vision and those types of things that begin to kick in, right? I do teach in a healthcare program too, you know. You folks are looking at me like, what the heck is that coming from? My father was a physician, my sister is a physician. So yeah, I come from a family of medical people. We look at things like this and we show that this is how we're going to measure, right, that this is effective. Now, if you were to put in as a part of your evaluation that in your effort to determine if your diabetes intervention is working, that you will do a blood stick, somebody on that panel is going to understand the medicine behind it and said, you don't know what the heck you're talking about. Blood sugar can change any time of the day. After I ate those taco things, I'm sure my blood sugar went up. Right? I ate white rice. So yeah, so measuring it now doesn't indicate anything in terms of accomplishment. But an A1C from 3 months ago and one today, that makes a difference. Similarly, you're going to look for measures of if you're going to change and impact hypertension. Well, let's talk about social services programs for that matter. If you have a program to reduce incidents of recidivism, right, among a certain population who are more likely to reoffend and get back incarcerated again, you're going to talk about how you will measure success. And how will that success be measured? One, their participation in programs after release, right? Family strategies, because individuals who have strong supportive mechanisms are less likely to go back. It's individuals who come out and have no connection to the community that are likely looking to get back there. So those are all factors you look as you talk about measurements. Now, we receive proposals of all sorts. And over the years, and because I teach in the social sciences, I have a broad base of, when I read these things, I know if they make sense or not. Yeah, when I look at a proposal, I know if it makes sense or not, right? And if I don't know, I reach out to people who help me to understand how it works. So just sort of keep that in mind as you're developing your evaluations. And then, of course, there's an analysis. Now, there's another type of evaluation. I just want to mention it to you. You don't have to do this for any of the grant programs I know, but it would be important for you to know that just in case somebody asks you to do one. There's a type of evaluation called a process-based evaluation, where the purpose of the evaluation that a grantor wants you to do is to determine if the process of implementing your program works so that it can be replicated in other organizations that they fund. A process-based evaluation. They're not just interested in outcomes, they're interested in how you do what you do. Does how you do it actually work? Do you follow? Right? And the reason for doing process-based evaluations, again, so we can replicate it and try it elsewhere. So a grantor may say, we have a model program that we fund in Richmond, California, and we want organizations in West County to begin to replicate that model. This is the process report that they provided as to how they set it up. We will take a request for qualifications to implement this process that was done in Richmond. Thus, a process-based evaluation. Now, if you are doing a program that's novel, it's good to document the process because there may be a grant or agency who comes along and say, we like what you're doing, and we are willing to fund you to teach others how to do that process. So if you're doing a new program, it always makes sense to document your process, and you know what? Keep it close, because it may be worth some money somewhere along the line. Keep it close, right? So that's an important piece to kind of keep in mind. So the purpose of a process-based evaluation then is kind of gearing to help you understand how a program works, right? What did you do? If you are running a successful program where you were able to attract a hard-to-serve population, right? I've always said, by the way, that churches have traditionally provided some of the most amazing services that they don't get funding for that secular nonprofits often do. Because number one, churches become reliant on their members to finance these programs, not realizing that as nonprofits, they themselves should actually get in there and begin. Now churches are beginning to get savvy and understanding that, look, you are very much a legitimate nonprofit if you're providing a service, but you may deal with a population that's finding it very difficult to step into the place in which you're providing your services, right? And you may just develop a specialized way to reach that hard-to-reach population. That's the kind of stuff we need to have in terms of these process-based evaluations, right? How did your program produce results? How did you measure the results, right? And, you know, what are inefficiencies that you need to work with to refine? How can you change that? Right? So again, if you look at the last bullet point, it says this is good for determining operational models for use elsewhere. This is where we need somebody to step up and find a good process-based program for dealing with your question of homelessness. We need somebody to come up with a model. And I can't help but believe that there are enough smart people out there to figure this. Somebody just needs to do it. And you know, one of the things we need to look at is being able to convince the funding organizations, including public agencies, to fund more of these types of programs that evaluate what process can be used to address some of these critical issues that are so persistent. There's some issues that are just not going away, right? They're just not going away, all right? This is the regional, not the regional center, the Family Justice Center Executive Director Susan Kim was just saying that they have had an influx of cases where the elderly are being financially abused, right? And they've been fighting this for years and they can't figure ways to get around it. We need somebody to figure that out, all right? We need somebody to figure out a process of how you deal with that, all right? I know it's not a sexy topic, but I got news for you. Unless you die early, all of us are going to be the elderly sometime. You make no mistake about it. So if for nothing else, be selfish about the fact that you're going to be old too. You know, that's the reality of it, right? And so we need to figure out things like this. And I think funding processes will be a good way to do that, and we need to sort of emphasize it. I've put in here the questions for process-based evaluations. I won't go through them right now, but there's quite a few of them. And by the way, these I did not produce myself. These came from United Way of America. So a reputable organization who understands how this works, right? How this actually works. So I want to come back here now, and I want to talk about the ones we talked about, the goals-based evaluations, the process-based evaluations, and the outcomes-based evaluation. And I have something I want us to actually do, right? And this is going to be our first group work, and we've got about 30 minutes to do it. We've come through the language of grant writing. We've come through the key elements of a proposal, specifically the needs assessment and so forth. We've talked about the statement of need. We talked about the evaluation. We talked about the logic model, right? So before we go into the final section after that will deal with budgeting, right, I want us to begin to do a little bit of groundwork here. And I'm going to tell you how it's going to work, right? We're going to just make it very easy. We're going to have two tables serve as a group, okay? So group, 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 group. Two tables, the one behind you, the one in front of you, that's your group. And I'm going to have an assignment for you. Why don't we go ahead and form those groups first? Turn and look at each other's pretty faces, and then I'll give you the assignment. All right, are we ready? All right, you're going to spend roughly 20 minutes. If I can get your attention, please. You're going to spend roughly 20 minutes working on this. And there's a reason why I chose this as your group assignment. And the reason is because, again, it's one of the most challenging aspects, and everything else hinges on it. You all here represent various communities. So your first challenge will be to identify which community you'd like to focus on, because I'm going to ask you to identify a community problem, right? And once you identify that community problem, I want you to begin the process of identifying who is affected by the problem, who the affected parties are, make it an exhaustive list as you can. Then identify what you think some of the factors are that contribute to the problem. And then number three, you want to talk about how, based on what is known, you think preliminarily you might be able to address the problem. In other words, you're beginning to form the kernel of a statement of need. Again, everything else you do in the proposal hinges on this. So I want you to begin to get some experience interacting with someone else doing this. When you are finished, you will need to identify one member of your group who is not microphone shy to report to the rest of the group what you found out and what you developed. Fire away. You got 20 minutes. let's have your attention, please. Thank you. Let's have your attention, please. Self-assurance is not a crime. Self-assurance is not a crime. When they were finished, this group applauded themselves, so we let them go first. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mari Benavides. I work for La Concordia Wellness Center. So our group decided to look at the WHO, which we're going to be doing invisible disabilities.
Sorry, repeat that.
Invisible disabilities.
Oh, okay.
And the problems for this, for example, is that there is discrimination because a lot of times, and this is just based off of the group feedback, is that it's not always seen. Like, for example, if someone has MS, it may seem like, they just might be hurting for a little bit, but this is something that goes on for a very, very long time and possibly a lifetime. It can be physical, it can be mental, and sometimes too, people have to slow down to understand what's going on. And also access to resources can be limited, or someone might not know where the access of resources is. And it could also be, for example, BIPOC communities, which have a harder time of accessing these resources as well. The how to address the problem. And also, factors of the problem as well include trauma, foster care, and addressing the problem is advocacy, resources, awareness, social workers, statistics to help back the claim that this needs to be addressed, internal data of services. For example, if an organization sees that this is an existing problem and they can back up that this is the population that they are serving and what they need, this is also something that they can use. And also having social workers and case managers can also significantly help this population. So,
Okay, good.
yeah.
Let's give them a hand. Question. So we're not done yet. You're not getting away that easy. So when we talk about invisible disabilities, you're really talking about disabilities that are not easily and visually identifiable, right?
Yes.
So does that make it, in your view, more difficult to make a case for the need?
Yes.
And what do you think then would be the strategy, given that extra layer of difficulty? And because those invisible disabilities are not a single disability, they're varied. They're across the spectrum of things, right? You mentioned multiple sclerosis as an example, but that's just one. Mm-hmm. There may be other debilitating illnesses that are not that visual. So how do you identify which to serve? It would seem to me that it's a pretty broad range. So what do you do with that?
I think definitely, like I stated before, looking at statistical data inside of your own organization, right? There might be a very broad range of what you're serving, but what's prominently coming up so that you can sort of focus on like a certain type of group can be definitely helpful, or even seeing that like a type of group is starting to pop up, how can you start supporting them and looking for resources?
Okay. All right. Thank you. Good. Right. Of all the other non-self-applauding groups, who would like to go next? Right over here.
Hello again, my name is Janice Franklin. The problem that we identified is that service providers lack awareness and connection to the resources they need to serve the populations that their organizations are designed to. So out of the various people that are affected, we decided to concentrate the WHO as a community-based organization personnel as the WHO. Some of the factors that contribute to the problem include perceived competition amongst CBOs, a lack of communication, no collective symposium or information source, and a saturation of services. How we suggest that we can change this is by creating a collective open source database that lists all of the organizations that are formed within a county or city, because of course that's all public records. So our organization to fix that, we would do the research to identify all of them so we don't have to ask them to join this list. We're just going to put them on it anyway. Then also it'll list what work they do and their purposes, and make this open to the public, as well as include some of the demographic information that pretty much all of these CBOs would need in order to apply for grants in that area. It'll also include volunteer listings, so that way all of these CBOs can get connected to the volunteers within that area so they can do the work. And then also get local government buy-in, where we would ask them to possibly require grantees to join this list, or make sure, confirm that they are on this list, so that there is a collective database and the information remains up to date, as well as we would manage this, so that way we create ease for the local governments not to have to manage this database, because we would do it for them.
Good, don't put it away just yet.
Okay.
So this is unusual. It is unusual because the service delivery is meant for nonprofit organizations. We do have a category that this falls into, and you may not be aware of it. In the grant-making world, we talk about this, what you're talking about, as capacity building, right? And the reason why I mention that to you is that if you're going to apply for money, you need to know the language, right? They refer to this as capacity building. In fact, the very things that you just described, there is a group of foundations called the Strong Fund, a collaborative of San Francisco Community Foundation, Wyanate Soda Foundation, East Bay Community Foundation, Lesher Family Foundation, and a few others, who have decided to do just what you are asking, to fund the capacity building that you are talking about in East Contra Costa County. They're in the process of doing it right now. Wow. So it's just an interesting coincidence. And that's what they're calling it. They want the nonprofits to be able to expand their capacity by being able to better provide the services and also to work collaboratively. So, you know what I remember I said earlier? You may think your idea is a different, brand new one, not knowing that there are funders already out there. So the interesting part is, if you were to do that, you already have funding alignment for it. That was my point. Well, you may not have been aware of this, but now you are. Give them a hand. There was a question right over there. There was a question.
Hi, my name is Rachel. I'm actually a counselor at Pittsburgh Unified and also a therapist. I just wanted to add, hearing your feedback about the program and maybe kind of learning what the community resources are like. It reminded me a lot about the 201 database system from the Contra Costa Crisis Center that lists out all the resources in the communities. But I think what you're referring to is more like the community-based side of things. So we can connect and bridge and network. But I wonder if it's a justification or a specific partnership opportunity to kind of open up that gap of okay, how are we resourcing this out to our families and community members, and also how are we resourcing that out on the other side for our community-based orgs? Is that kind of?
Yeah.
People that are on your database, they volunteer yes, we want to be honest.
Yeah.
Volunteers that we not giving them a choice.
And yeah, very good.
All the publicly registered organizations, put them on here, and they can just confirm deny what's accurate and what's not based on what they have or showing to the public.
And just so you know, just about a month ago, the county released an RFP for an umbrella organization in East County to serve as the coordinator for that capacity building. And that RFP had 2 responses. I'm not at liberty to tell what the names are, right? But it was for $100,000. And the reason I know this is because I helped develop the RFP, and I'm one of the reviewers of the 2 responses that we received. So we'll be reviewing those grant proposals within the next couple of weeks, and then announcing the organization that will serve as the umbrella organization for working to do the nonprofit capacity building. So again, this is all coming together quite nicely. What an interesting kind of surprise there. All right. Good, give him a hand, give him a hand. That was nice. All right, next group, right here. At the front, they're ready. It's so funny how the more time passes, the bolder the groups get. Everybody's ready to speak then. There we go.
Hi, everybody. The question was identify a community problem, and it was lack of access to health care. And while that affects a lot of people from the oldest to the youngest, we picked the older ones, the seniors, that are Medicare qualified and often overlooked. And what factors contribute is the lack of transportation, redlining. That was really good. The location that they're in. Some people are in a rural area. Abuse. Some people are being abused and they can't make it out. Lack of understanding. I have a friend, she's had a stroke and she has traumatic brain injury, and the smallest things are a trial for her. Wow. Complicated paperwork. Helping my dad navigate his health insurance, and they would just keep dropping him because he wouldn't pay the premiums because he didn't understand what he was paying. Lack of computer skills. And I tell people, do not get caught in the digital divide. Learn how to work your device. How can the problem be fixed? We're talking about bringing a mobile clinic to people that provides health care and mental health care, and to provide a lift to other clinics for advanced care that they can't get in a bus. Mm-hmm. Mobile patient navigator, a mobile patient navigator. We come to you, provide services, and to help them understand what they're going through and what they're doing, to provide compassion and companionship, to refer them to other agencies, which means we'd have to be in a partnership with other people, to offer workshops, mobile workshops and classes, so they have a fighting chance in their golden years. And it says, what are we doing based on the research and what is known? That's the wrong line. What is your organization doing? And I just put an arrow to everything I just named.
Yeah.
Mobile Hope for Seniors. We even gave it a name. What more can be done? We can advocate. We can lobby. This involves government and everybody, and to collaborate with other agencies so we don't duplicate services, and so we can provide a seamless experience for people experiencing these things.
You know what I'm sitting here thinking? That is so well articulated, I would fund it. Seriously. Seriously. Yeah. So the very first thing that struck me is that you narrowed the focus, right? You didn't just talk about, you said not just everybody. You identified that there are a lot more individuals who have a problem with access to health care, but you identified a narrowed population where it's easy to track and identify. Seniors, right? You identified a need, and more than that, there are seniors who are trying to navigate Medicare. That's even further narrow. We like when you carve out a niche and saying, this is what we'll target. Grantors like that. If you're all over the place, they're like, okay, how are we going to measure that you're actually doing this? When it's that narrow, it's nice. And you've worked really well at identifying what the issues are. You talked about not being familiar with the technology because everything is online these days. And a lot of seniors struggle with the idea of accessing those essential services through online portals. For those of us who grew up in the computer era, we think it's easy. It's no big deal, but a lot of seniors struggle with that, right? And you talked about the fact that a mobile navigator goes to them and connects them to those services. It was just beautiful to listen to. That's all I can say. Thank you. Give them a hand.
Thank you.
All right, who wants to go next? Wow, in the back, in the far back, and then we'll come back to you next right over here.
All All right, hello everyone. My name is Marisa, and I'm representing our group here. Our issue was low literacy and test scores in 3rd and 4th grade students at Willow Cove Elementary School, specifically.
Nice, see there already?
Thank you.
Targeted population, narrow, focus, a specific place, specific grades. A so far.
Okay.
All right, let's go. Keep it now. Keep the A, all right?
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so some of the factors that contribute to the low literacy and low test scores are a language barrier between the students, between the teachers, the students, and the parents. Because one of the examples that we had was that if a student is a Spanish speaker, they come from a home that only speaks Spanish, they're bringing homework home that's in English that the student may not understand, and they cannot get the support that they need at home to understand that, because the parents don't understand it either. They don't speak English, they can't read English, and that's the issue. And then also those teachers are not able to support those families if they don't have the language as well. So our solution, or what, was to establish a reading assistance program that will aid parents, teachers, and students with the fundamentals of English language and reading comprehension skills to meet the state standards for 3rd and 4th grade. And so the how is based on our research, that it'll take the 3-prong approach, so the teachers, the students, and the parents, and we found that we're fabricating here, but looking at other states and other communities, there are programs that we would essentially be replicating in a sense, because we've seen that it's been effective in other communities in raising test scores. And to use some language here that we got was that if we invest in the infrastructure, the outcomes improve. And so the infrastructure here would be being able to support the teachers, the parents, and the students, so that then they would have a better understanding of their assignments and programming, and be able to have increased test scores. And so we'd be able to see what their test scores were prior to the program, and then their test scores after, to see what how they benefited from the programming.
Clear articulation of the problem, understanding who the impacted parties are. You talked about parents. You talked about the disconnect between kids coming from homes where Spanish is the sole language spoken, but they get homework in English, so the parents can't help them even if they wanted to. You talk about the teacher's role in there, so you've covered essentially what is effectively the triad in education: the student, the parent, the teacher, the school. Excellent. You started off with an A, and you kept the A. Very good. All right, right over here. I think we have a group right here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm Elaine, and I represent 333 Arts, which is a art and cultural programming inclusive to everyone in all communities. But today I'm representing, we chose, our group here chose seniors living alone. And for example, in Pittsburgh, we know that there's 20,000 people eligible for these senior activities, and there's 300 people signed up with certain groups. So our problem is making sure that they're staying active, because there's premature death proven caused by isolation. So who is it affect? It affects our retired seniors, family members, caregivers, neighbors, healthcare providers, emergency. And why? What are the factors? We chose lack of community, because they'd worked at the maybe outside their home for so long, they came back to Pittsburgh, and now they're not connecting with anyone else. Problems identifying who needs the help out there because they're staying inside their house. Could be a death of a spouse, kids moving away. We know there's transportation issues talked about, inability to access the social media and technologies, and again, general physical and mental deterioration due to aging. So how can we help? We want to get activities going. Right now, perhaps we're working on, our website, word of mouth, outreach. So we really want to help out by partnering more with the many organizations already helping the seniors. So those county social services, contacting our doctors, making sure there's other organizations like Choice in Aging that can really help us do the same type of work.
Wow, that is excellent. And by the way, I have heard and we have funded some of what you just said. So I know who is in the group when I'm looking, and it all makes sense to me. Right? That is really quite good. And you know, I think it's important to talk about seniors and the sense of isolation, right? There is and I grew up in a different culture. I grew up in a culture where, as our parents aged, we saw it as not a burden but an honor to just reverse those roles and take care of them. You know, both of my parents are deceased and my grandparents are deceased. But I remember, I've always known that as my parents got older, it would be my pleasure to take care of them, to make them feel committed, to make them feel like they're still a part of life. And you are right, we've talked about this before. When seniors become isolated from their communities, then premature death kicks in because there's nothing to value, nothing to live for. So this is not just a cursory issue, it's real, right? And we appreciate programs that focus like this on the elderly. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Neil Bringetzi, Midnight Basketball. Midnight Basketball is a year-round program that includes IEPs and tutors and caseworkers. So it's a very different program. Mm-hmm. But that's not what we're talking about today.
And we fund Midnight Basketball.
We fund Midnight Basketball, yeah. Amen. However, there's a group that has not been addressed either in this room or in the general population. We are talking about foster youth with disabilities.
Wow.
Most people don't realize that at the age of 18, they age out of the system and they no longer have that same disability support structure. Now, the problem with that, pardon me if I walk around a little bit.
He wants to preach, man. He wants to preach. I'm sorry. He's like, turning and walking.
Is that it's a lack of knowledge and a lack of education. For my people perish for lack of knowledge. People don't know that this is what happens when they reach that age of 18. People don't realize that they haven't taught the kids what's going to happen when they turn 18. So where is the fault? Where is the mistake? It's all the way around. It's not only the foster parents, but the parents. It's not just the foster parents and the parents, it's the social workers. They have a point in time where they can tell them, we can get you help beyond 18.
Yeah.
But they don't tell every child. Some of the children still fall between the cracks, even though the law was put in place that at 16, we can give you this till you're 24.
Correct.
But because they don't know, because they haven't been taught, those are the factors that contribute to these people falling in between the cracks. So we came to the how. It's a big problem. And we don't know if we can get them to join in and help us with this big problem. So we said, you know what we're gonna do? Why don't we do it this way? We're gonna simplify it for you. We'll do it at one high school. We'll go to one high school and we'll take the seniors because, you know, they're about to hit it and they don't even know that they're about to hit it. And then it's like, well, that's good, but what else could we do? So then we say, you know what? We're gonna run not only that cohort, we're gonna run a second one at the junior high school, preparing them for that next level. In other words, we're gonna prepare the kids to talk to the parents and the foster parents and their social workers about what's coming next. And we're gonna educate all of those at that level so that when that child gets to that 16-year-old and has to fill out that document, they're prepared to do so. And we are going to also run a feasibility study. We learned a lot here today. We got surveys ready. We already got our surveys ready. We done figured it out over here at this table. We got surveys ready. We got a letter ready for Dr. David. We're going to write it to him so he can write it for us. But that is the who, the what, and the how, and what our organization is planning on doing, and what more can be done.
Excellent. Give him a hand. We've talked a lot over the years about kids emancipating out of foster care. We never actually talked about kids who have disabilities and emancipating out of foster care. So you've moved it to a very specialized population, which improves the fundability of it, because it means that it may show a need. You may be able to establish that there is a need. So the other part too is that we may not have talked with kids. So one of the things we have informationally in Contra Costa County, the social workers have told us that a lot of the kids, even though they may mention to them that they want to stay in, they can stay in the system, many of them will say, heck no. One, because they're not comfortable with the foster parents. One, they're not comfortable with the system. Another is that they feel they need a sense of freedom. And so to me, it's quite an uphill journey to persuade them that there's value in relinquishing some of your perceived freedom in favor of receiving additional services. So that is an issue. That is a major issue. And again, I'm kind of startled that nobody has talked about that before. Now that I'm hearing it for the first time, actually, specifically for that subpopulation. Before the next group comes in, you had a question, comment?
Yes, I have a question about.
Hold the mic close so we can hear you.
Yes, I have a question about that. It's a statement and a question. Because what you just stated, I've experienced that. I spent a decade in foster care and I aged out when I turned 18. I graduated from Pittsburgh High. Mm-hmm. And I'm now living with multiple sclerosis as an adult and everything. So that really piqued my interest, because when I emancipated at 2000, the year 2000, and when I emancipated, I had to go to court. And they wanted to keep me in foster care. And because I spent a decade and everything else, I was ready to get out. Yeah. You know, so I didn't know, the different programs. They have since revamped foster care and everything, and provided more funding. The funding they had before the 2000s and everything, they had no funding. We now have more awareness and more funding. And I just learned this when I went to DVC last year, and I got reconnected with Independent Living Skills Resources. They work with adolescents who are in foster care with disabilities and everything else. And so when I got reconnected with them and everything else, because of what I'm living with, I was not aware that all these resources was available, and they were doing their best they can. But life happens, and I had to take a break and everything. And so I'm just curious. My question is like, I would like to partner, but to get with you all, because I'm interested and would like to bring more awareness and everything else, because we don't know the benefits and stuff. We do. I can't speak. I was ready, because I was ready to get out the foster care system. Yeah. So what can we do to bring? I'm asking, what can we do to help the children feel, this is benefit? We can't support you and everything, because we don't know. We just know. I know for me, I was a burden, being in foster care and going from 7 different foster homes at a time before 18 and everything. I was ready to get out of here, the system and everything else. So, I'm fortunate. My kids are grown and they're successful as a single parent and everything. My daughter's in the Army now. My son's pursuing computer programming. So I want to give back to others and help them and advocate. So I would like to get with you, sir. Okay. And I don't know. That's the question. Like, how can we help? No, that's okay.
That's okay. And you guys are going to talk after. But let me just say this. We appreciate your willingness to disclose this here to us, because it makes what they were saying more than just theory. It's a reality. I'm just really thankful that you did not mind sharing your lived experience with this, because it accentuates the reality of what they were saying. This is a need. So I hope we can absolutely connect, and you guys will be able to talk, because I would love to see something like this myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Right over here, please.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. Hi, my name is Sandra, and today we want to address a problem that each of us see every single day when we are among going our own way and doing our things, and that's fentanyl.
Sorry, that is what?
Fentanyl.
Okay, fentanyl. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
fentanyl. We know that is an epidemic here in our country, and it impacts all of us. It impacts families, first responders, our mental, our healthcare system, our mental health system, et cetera. It impacts everyone. But one of the things that we may not be conscious of that it really impacts is the next generation of children.
Yeah.
Because when people are addicted to this drug and, and they're pregnant, particularly women, this keeps getting passed on in terms of generational addictions and problems. So that's who it impacts. How did we get here? Well, from research, it started off by pharmaceutical companies, doctors overprescribing, and then this drug got carried on to the streets and started getting mixed with other street drugs. And now, every day when we're walking, going our own way, mentioned like I said, we're watching it and we're seeing it. But some of us, but not all, is looking at it as that's the unhoused. Truly, that is the unhoused. However, with $27 billion already being invested in trying to solve this problem, meaning the state of California invested $27 billion of trying to solve the unhoused problem. One of the things that, in terms of how and a solution we came up with, is partnering with organizations and the wraparound programs that's already in place, and all the mental health services that we hear and talk about that's already in place. But what I don't see more of we don't see more of that's already in place are inpatient facilities. Fentanyl is not just an addiction from a mental capacity, but it's physical. It's like people are taking heroin. They need medical intervention to help them get off the drug. And we do not have more inpatient medical facilities to partner with the psychotherapy to help these individuals. And so that's part of our solution of bringing in more inpatient facilities that incorporates medical intervention to help these individuals.
Absolutely. Expensive, too.
But we're already $27 billion invested.
No doubt, no doubt. One of the challenges with fentanyl and other addictions of almost any sort is that there is a propensity in some circles to see addiction through a mental health lens as opposed to physical addiction to a substance. And that often impacts where we're willing to put our money. And it's unfortunate, but you're right. Detoxifying from fentanyl may require being hospitalized. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I remember we were at a meeting of local cities in Contra Costa County, and there was conversation that came up about having an expanded facility in Pittsburgh for detoxing individuals from this type of medication. There was immediate resistance. We don't want that here. People perceive that more as a risk to what they think of as the primrose look of their community. And so they don't want it. They consider that spoiling their community. But at some point, we do have to realize an illness is an illness is an illness, right? And thank you for at least tackling the subject. Appreciate it. Thank you. There's a question in the back. Is your group ready, or do you have a question?
Question and comment. So I just wanted to say I commend you guys for speaking about substance abuse and a solution, because I'm in the business of trying to utilize some of those billions of dollars to get people off the street, you know. But I noticed that the people who are in business already and are doing it, a lot of them are just housing these people, and then they lose their housing because they have a substance abuse problem. And so they're back on the street. So it's a revolving door. And I can't understand why we don't solve the root of the problem first.
Yeah.
And so if we don't have the funding to house individuals to get the medical need that they so and desperately want, some of them want it. They want to get off the street. Granted, there are those who don't. I understand that. They're not there yet. But how do we solve that problem so they don't keep going through the revolving door of getting housing, losing housing because they are on the substance? How do you, a person, Dr. Fraser, who works with grants and funding, how do we oppose a situation to you and a group of you guys who offer funding for nonprofits so that we can write it to a sense that it's appealing and it's not a turnoff? Like you said, most people, they are turned off by that subject. They don't want to fund that project. Why not? And how do we change that mindset?
Yeah, it really is perception. It absolutely is. And the fact that a lot of the grantor agencies have program officers or those on their boards who maybe come from a generation where they never really understood these types of things, these types of services. You know, if you get a bunch of young folks from Silicon Valley who is accustomed to venture capital types funding activities, and all of a sudden they're serving on these boards and you start talking about those types of issues, they may or may not connect with it. Right? They may or may not connect with it. There is less representation of individuals who experience this stuff as service providers or as individuals who've experienced rehabilitation themselves. Those aren't the people sitting on the boards making the decisions. And so I think part of the strategy needs to be incorporating the contribution of individuals who have lived it or who are providing the services. And that isn't always easy to do, right? But I appreciate your raising it. Which groups did not speak yet? Let's see your hands. Okay, we have 3 groups that didn't speak, or 2. Let's hear from you so we can take a break and then wrap up.
Hi, everybody. Bear with me, I am a little nervous. My name is Tyler. I am not representing a nonprofit organization, but I am a student of Dr. Fraser's MPA program. A couple of us are here. So our our problem that we decided to identify was truancy in education. Now, I know we've already discussed that today, but what is going to make our program different from some of the things that we've already discussed? Now, I don't know how many of you are parents. I am not, but I did used to be an educator for 2 years after my undergraduate experience, and I will say that something that these schools lacked was the in-school support with counselors. Not saying that counselors don't exist, there's just not enough of them in schools to support as many students that there are. So what will our program be doing? We will be providing case management workers in these schools to work directly with students, families, and teachers as well to see what resources that they are lacking. And the what that we identified is the lack of resource specialists, unstable housing, mental health crises, bullying, and also financial instability. So what would that look like for our program? Well, we want these case management workers to be in these schools every day on a weekly basis, but then how will we be able to supplement that? By having a quarterly resource fair, one Saturday every 3 months. And what resources will we be providing? Transportation. I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of the Clipper Start program. I actually was a recipient of the youth one when I was in high school because I was taking the bus every day to school. That's how I got around. I'm originally from San Francisco, by the way. That's how I was getting around on Muni and on BART because my family, they worked. They couldn't take me everywhere I wanted to go.
Yeah.
Other thing is also providing tutors. Students, we're talking about truancy here. They may not be as involved in school. They may not hey, some people don't care about school, and that's fair. School isn't for everybody. It's hard, you know? You can't put that pressure on them and be like, yeah, this is what you need, but why? Why do they need it? And how can we help them improve? So providing tutors. Also SNAP benefits. How can we help these families apply for that? They may be having food insecurity problems, and that's why students are showing up to school. Section 8, having unstable housing. How can we let them know what lists are already opening? Can we provide these resources to them on a daily basis? And also having clothing drives. I don't know if any of you have ever drove past Pinot Valley High School. They have clothing drop-off bins in the parking lot of their school. Public high school, I've never ever seen that. I went to Catholic school, so I was a scholarship student. Nobody knew how I was growing up or what I did or did not have. But there are public schools where students are needing these things because they're lacking the resources and they're too scared to speak up. And that's where our program will come in. And that's all I have.
She was always a genius. Yeah, I didn't make her that. She brought that. I got to tell you right now. Thank you. Appreciate it. We have 2 more groups. Let's hear from you, and then we'll take our break. Go ahead.
Hey, how you doing? You hear me?
All right.
All right, my name's Dan. I'm with the Contra Costa County Veteran Service Office. Our group focused on suicide prevention among veterans, specifically those who separated within 3 years is where we're seeing uptake. I brought this conversation to our table because our current program right now, we lost some funding through a CalVet. We're actually trying to apply for a federal grant under the Staff Sergeant Fox Suicide Prevention. So that's why I'm here, to try to learn how to get this done so I can turn around and take it back to my office. So the what state the factors that contributed. So when service members come back in, to my colleague here, she wanted me to point out that if a service member exits the service, after about 6 months when they get home, if they don't disclose any injuries or illnesses to the VA, their health care gets cut off at 6 months. So they're kind of just left out in the dust. So if you think about trying to leave a unit, come back home to a community that you're not familiar with, most of your friends have moved on, everything's kind of new to you. If you don't find gainful employment, or if you're of school age and go back to school, your health care just kind of ends after 6 months. So we're trying to build that bridge between a health care crisis, if any veteran is experiencing that. What our office is hoping to do with this grant money is to create 2 positions. One was going to be a program manager who could probably manage this a little bit better than I could. And then we're going to try to get a social worker who could fast track us between the VA healthcare clinic, especially the mental health department over at the Martinez location, which is right across the highway from us. So rather than having a veteran come to me with a mental health crisis and then I have to fill out the paperwork, which is part of our problem, as many of you has also disclosed that the paperwork and enrollment process and the bureaucracy behind it often impedes them from obtaining care that they need, especially if it's critical and time sensitive. You're looking at a 3 to 4 month turnaround. Wow. We just want to be a direct link between our facility when they disclose it, and then let's get them right over there to the healthcare access that they might need at that point in time. So right now, based on the research and what is known, how can you help alleviate the problem? Kind of like as I just stated, kind of having a highway or a different type of system that we can do locally that's not federally mandated to say. So instead of applying for healthcare eligibility, let's just get them right over there through the CERN program that we're working with here. And then what is your organization doing and what more can be done? Obviously awareness. I want to shout out to the CCTV folks over here who do Veterans Voices. That is also an avenue for us to get the word out. So with Contra Costa County Veterans, we're trying to bring suicide prevention and awareness more to light, but then also offering an avenue to actually provide care in the capacity that we can or are allowed to.
I just want you to know that I will be a resource for you if you need it. I consider it a selfish reason. My son is a Marine veteran, and fortunately for him, he learned quickly how to navigate the system, right? But all do not, right? All do not. And he came home to support. And I have taken him with me to Veterans Day events and say, this is my son, and I'm proud of his service. There's some of our veterans who come home and in communities, they feel less than welcome, right? And that's something, that makes it that much harder, right? So I appreciate that. And again, by all means, reach out to me as you navigate that, if that is becoming a real program, and I'll put my skills to work for you. Absolutely. Do we have another group we have not heard from yet? Right over here. Let's get these groups quickly, please, because we need to take a break so we can come back and deal with finance in the last section.
Is it on? Okay, sorry.
Oh, it is now.
Okay, I'll be quick. So once again, my name is Maria Rosa Ferreira, and the issue that we're tackling is HIV. Although it is a very broad and very big spectrum, we came down and narrowed it down to the youth. Because right now, like I mentioned earlier, we are seeing an uptake in cases amongst 18 and 24, meaning that we are lacking in some areas within that high school, middle school, so we said youth, but I particularly am going to target women or like females of the youth, because a lot of the cases also that we have seen, unfortunately, have been heterosexual straight women. So that's one of the things that we're targeting. We want to come up with a program that gives these girls, these girls access to sexual health education, that with their own health insurance. We want to teach them how to navigate the system without having their parents, be known, unfortunately, because they come from either very strict households or different cultures, stigma behind it, thinking that only gay men get it, and that's far beyond that. So we want to educate them. We want to let them know there are resources. We want to also, the way that we're going to do this is we want to partner with already established organizations that are already working with this population. Since Contra Costa Health Services is an integrated health system, meaning that if we refer somebody, it has to be within the county. It doesn't really have a lot of programs outside. So we want to work and we want to come up with a clinic or a program outside in different areas of the county, west, central, east, to be able to have them come in. They could do homework, we could talk to them, provide pads, provide all that resources that they might not have at home. Let them know that, especially me coming from a first generation Mexican household, I was always told, don't get pregnant. Like, is that all? So we want to let them know that there's something more out there than just getting pregnant on the first time you have sex. You could get an STI, let them know how they could get that. Let them know that there's also bacterial infections, that it might not be their fault. It might just be a change in their body wash, a change in their soap, anything that it may be. So we want to educate them, let them really be known, and have them be positive, have that positive reinforcement about their body image, about their self-esteem, and let them know that we are here for them, and we are going to help you, whether it be in sexual health, mental health. If you're experiencing homelessness, we want to target all these areas that affect them and, help them succeed.
Yeah. Now, before she moves on, let me just say this. You may not be aware, because it was a different division of Contra Costa Health that have received grants from the Keller Canyon Mitigation Fund over the past couple of years for providing sex education, sexual health education to young girls, primarily in the Bay Point area. Right, it was a different department. It was, I believe, through one of the ambassador programs, which have now gone away, right? That said, it is a very important topic to address. I sometimes find it unbelievable that this has fallen so far off the radar. People think it's not a problem anymore, and it is. It really is. So I appreciate that. And I think that's a good, solid program that would definitely attract funding.
And we also want to bring back public campaigning like they did in the 90s, do some advertisement there, put it back on the TV, a lot of social media campaigning, because TikTok, Instagram, that's where it's at. So we want to promote it ways that it will be accessible to the youth.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Excellent. We have another group we have not heard from right here. And then yours is the last group, right? Okay, good.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Leticia. I actually work with Pittsburgh Unified School District, and our table was primarily all focused on literacy, so we went with Cecilia's problem, So the focus is helping support young children in Pittsburgh age 0 to 5, so before they come to our school district. And the problem was children arriving lacking foundational literacy skills. So who it's affecting is obviously the children age 0 to 5, parents and families as well, teachers, because their students are arriving with all different skill sets at the different entry points, whether they're entering in preschool, TK, or kinder. We're looking at coordinating efforts to address this and making sure that families receive different workshops and knowledge to know how to read with their children at home and establish those early reading patterns. Also addressing the issue that not all of our parents in Pittsburgh know how to read, so making sure we give parents access to resources to help support them and give them some strategies and ways they can still build literacy with their children at home. Making sure that all of our families are aware of have access to the library, and if the library is not close to them, making sure that they have access to books. How we're going to do this is by starting the Dolly Parton Reading Project in the Pittsburgh area, which brings books to children age 0 to 5 each month of the year, and also collaborating with the school district to promote it and make sure it also includes parent education programming.
Excellent. Early intervention always makes sense. Absolutely. Thank you. Last group over here.
No pressure. Let me do it in 2 minutes so we can all go on break, right? My name is Pastor Chantal. I'm from Genesis Church. And together, all collaboratively, we all wanted to focus on food insecurity. We believe that food security is not a privilege, but it's a right. Focusing on single-parent households, they're now in the poverty threshold between $70,000 to $100,000, meaning that insecurity does no longer have a face. What we found is in our giving and our grocery outreach program is that these families are now coming, and we see Range Rovers all the way to bicycles. And so now people, there are compensating factors that are affecting these households that had never been affected before. The rising prices in food, gas prices, lack of jobs, education, high interest rates, because many of these people are credit impaired, and so everything they pay is at a higher rate. Wow. They are now rent poor as well as vehicle poor. They're having to choose between gas or food, shoes for their children, or rent. And so how we want to do this is we want to start we're actually doing this, a program where we're teaching people through a stipend program, because many of these parents can't afford to be off of work to get training. So we are offering them a stipend program to be able to come in and learn how to create budgets, how to live within their means, but more importantly, how to interview up. Most people who are in one line of work tend to always stay in that line of work, even though it's not enough. So teaching people how to have the confidence to interview up, how to make room for themselves at the corporate ladder, realizing that if they hire you, they have to train you, and therefore changing the trajectory of their household and bringing them out of food insecurity as well as rent instability.
Wow, very good. But like you said, it's a working program. Makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. We appreciate that. Thank you. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take 10 minutes. Right? It is now, according to my watch, unless Apple is lying, it is now roughly 20 minutes before 4. Let's come back at 10 to 4. And I want to tell you that the last section we'll cover, we'll have you out of here by 4:30. Don't worry. The last section we'll cover is a critical section for the proposal. One of the most, it's the budget. I know some of you are afraid of numbers, right? Don't worry. We'll be happy. See you in 10.